Okay, so today we're going to like really dive into this film.
Yeah.
Alien, Covenant.
Covenant.
Alien.
Ridley
Sorry.
Scott's,
Yeah.
2017 film, and you guys sent in a bunch of materials.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting because we have, kind of the backbone of the film, the production details on IMDb and stuff, and then we also have like all these interesting trivia things about it and
behind the scenes stuff, yeah.
And then a whole range of
opinions.
A full spectrum of opinions.
From fans to people who hated it.
From ardent fans to deeply disappointed critics.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
that's kind of our mission here, right? Is to look at it from all these angles and
what's the point of
try and unpack
this deep dive?
What is it about Alien Covenant?
Yeah.
Why is it such a divisive film?
Yeah. And how does it all
going on
fit together?
What are the key things we need to know?
It's a multifaceted view that we're going to take.
Yeah.
So I think
multifaceted, and we're going to take a kind of multi-pronged approach as well. We're going to start by...
Where do we begin?
Well, I think the natural place to begin with a film like this is with the people who made it.
Okay.
The production, the key personnel.
So who are the
folks?
Like the big...
The prime movers.
Yeah.
Who shaped this thing.
Well, I mean, obviously right off the bat, Ridley Scott.
Yeah, you can't talk about an Alien film without talking about Ridley Scott, at least the ones that he directed.
This is the guy who...
Yeah, so this is the visionary behind...
Who made this whole thing.
The original Alien.
Right.
And also directed Prometheus. So he's deeply involved.
It's a big deal.
In this universe.
That he came back to
it suggests, a certain artistic intention.
It's not just anybody.
Yeah.
Picking up
He wants to say something.
The reins.
Yeah, and particularly after Prometheus, which was a film that had
that's what I was going to say.
A very divisive...
ask about it. It's like, how did Prometheus...
So you've got to...
assume that he was responding to that in some way with this film.
Yeah, and it's interesting, too, that, just looking at the credits...
Yeah.
There are a lot of
writers.
Writers involved. You've got based on credit for Dan O'Bannon.
Story by credit for Jack Paglin.
And Ronald Shusett, who were...
Michael Green.
The original.
John Logan wrote on it. Dante Harper wrote on it.
Theaters.
A lot of cooks in the kitchen.
Yeah.
And I think that often happens with these big, franchise films.
Is this kind of like there's a lot...
Red flag or something?
I don't know if it's a red flag.
I mean, you see that?
It's just something to be aware of.
Yeah.
Because when you have that many writers,
you're
going to have that many different visions and opinions and intentions.
And like different
opinions about...
Of the final product feeling somewhat disjointed.
Okay.
Or incoherent.
Yeah. And I think...
So maybe this explains...
It may explain some of the
things that we got from you guys.
That we're seeing in the feedback.
Yeah.
And we'll get into the
plot holes
stuff.
Yeah. But let's move on to the cast.
Okay. Who are the actors?
The players here. Who brought these characters to life?
Well, we've got
a familiar face in Michael Fassbender.
Oh yeah.
But he's playing two roles in this film.
He's both David.
He's both David from Prometheus.
And Walter.
And Walter, a newer model of android.
Okay, so this is really important. Yeah. And his performance was widely praised, even by people who didn't like the film.
Yeah, it seems like.
So he's clearly doing something.
A standout performance.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then we have Catherine Waterston.
As Daniels. Okay.
And she kind of, steps into the role of the strong female lead.
Yeah.
That's Sigourney Weaver. So iconically established.
She's got big shoes to fill.
Big shoes to fill for sure.
Yeah.
And we also have Billy Crudup.
As Orm.
The captain.
Okay.
And Danny McBride.
Oh, wow.
Who
That's a
takes a little bit of a turn here.
Departure
from his usual comedic roles.
Yeah, he plays Tennessee.
Yeah, he plays Tennessee the pilot.
Yeah. And what about...
And then we've got a few kind of...
cameo
appearances.
Yeah.
That tie the film back to Prometheus.
Okay.
We see James Franco.
Briefly.
We see Guy Pearce reprising his role as Peter Wayland.
Yeah.
And even Noomi Rapace as Dr. Elizabeth Shaw.
Yeah.
So it's really...
It's just huge.
Emphasizing that this is a direct continuation.
Of that story. Like a side story or something.
Right.
Yeah.
This is really like...
Building on those mysteries.
Part 2.
Of Prometheus almost.
Exactly.
Yeah. What about the music?
Okay, so this is interesting. The composer is Jed Kersel.
Jed Kersel.
But we hear Jerry Goldsmith.
All over this.
Jerry Goldsmith's score.
Yeah.
From the original Alien.
Yeah, especially.
Quite prominently in the first act.
In the beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's a really...
So what do you make of that?
Effective way of sort of grounding the audience.
Yeah.
In the...
our
familiar territory of the franchise.
Of what this is.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, it's the first Alien film.
And it's interesting to know.
Since the original.
That it's the first Alien film.
To use Goldsmith's theme, since the original, to actually use Goldsmith's theme over the main title sequence.
Yeah. And then later.
He
kind of like
sneaks.
Growls weaves in these little.
In other places.
Homage to Goldsmith throughout the score.
Very cool.
It's cool.
Yeah. And it's actually kind of a.
Yeah, it's also interesting to note that.
Fun fact.
Ridley Scott has actually used a different composer.
Ridley Scott uses a different composer.
For every Alien film.
On every Alien film.
Yeah.
So he's got like a real...
So that kind of suggests that he's really interested in creating a unique sonic identity for each film.
Very interesting. So we should also mention...
You should also mention.
The other...
The cinematographer.
The people behind the scenes.
Darius Wolski.
Yeah.
The film editor, Pietro Scalia.
Yeah.
They all
been designed.
Contributed to the... costume design.
And feel and
all the
pace of the film.
Visual effects.
Yeah. The production designer was Chris Seegers.
Yeah.
Janty Yates did the costumes.
Yeah.
And there were a bunch of visual effects studios involved as well.
Okay. Yeah. The visual effects were definitely like a big topic.
Yeah, we'll get to that.
Of discussion when
we talk about the reaction.
In the feedback. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, but let's talk about the plot.
Yeah, let's actually get into like what this film is about.
Okay. So Alien. Covenant takes place in 2104.
10 years after.
10 years after the events of Prometheus.
Okay.
The colony ship Covenant is on a mission to a planet called Orge 6.
Okay.
And they're carrying thousands of colonists in stasis.
So this is like a big...
This is a big colonization mission.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so
the inciting incident
that kicks it all off
of the film,
is that they pick up a distress signal. And the signal is John Denver's.
Oh wow!
Take me home, country roads.
Take me home, country roads.
And it's coming from a planet.
So that's weird.
Yeah, a little strange, right?
Yeah.
And it's a planet that's much closer to them than Orge 6.
Yeah.
And it looks like it could be habitable.
Okay. So this is
they face a dilemma.
Decision.
Yeah. Do they continue on...
Stay on mission.
Their mission to Orge 6?
What do they investigate?
Or do they investigate this strange signal?
Okay, so...
Of course, like a big...
They decide to investigate.
Criticism.
Yeah.
We heard.
A lot of people had problems with that decision.
Yeah, a lot of people.
They felt it was illogical.
Yeah, like why would you...
Given the stakes.
Risk this whole...
Thing.
So it kind of reminds me...
Of the original.
Right. It is very reminiscent of Alien, what in the Stromo.
Like this is kind of a classic horror trope.
It's that kind of classic horror setup.
Where you think you're going somewhere safe.
Yeah. You're going from point A to point B.
And then something sidetracked happens.
Okay.
So they land on the planet.
Okay.
And they discover David.
Okay. The android.
The android from Prometheus.
Yeah.
So he'll
survive.
Somehow.
Yeah.
And we also find out what happened to Elizabeth Shaw.
Oh, yeah. What happened to... She's dead.
Her?
Yeah, we see her.
Okay.
Her body is being used for some of David's experiments.
So, like, disturbing.
And we also see her in a pre-recorded message.
Okay.
So, again, really emphasizing that connection to Prometheus.
It's all connected.
Yeah.
Okay.
And on this planet, they encounter a new creature.
Okay.
Called the Xenomorph.
Alien.
And it's really interesting. The Xenomorph...
These guys are creepy.
They're pretty creepy looking.
Yeah.
And their design is actually based on some of the unused big silo concepts.
What does that mean?
That H.R. Geiger developed for the original Alien.
Oh, so like stuff that didn't...
Yeah, so he had all these ideas...
Into the first one.
That never made it into the final film.
Yeah.
But they kind of revisited them...
That's interesting.
...for this film.
Okay.
And the fans have nicknamed the Xenomorphs.
Oh, yeah.
The backburster and the mouthburster.
Yeah, backburster. I remember that.
Pre-cruise.
Mouthburster. That's gnarly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like the egg sacs that...
Yeah, and the egg sac itself.
They come out
of? It actually resembles a puffball fungus.
Oh, wow.
So there's this kind of...
So like a real... like
natural blend of the organic and the alien.
Yeah. So we find out that David...
Yeah, we find out that...
David has been very busy.
Been messing around.
In the,
10 years.
With this black goo.
Since we last saw him.
The black mutagen.
Yeah, he's been experimenting with the black mutagen.
Yeah. And he's the one who killed.
And we learn that he was responsible.
The engineers on the planet?
For the deaths of the humanoids on the planet.
Yeah.
By releasing the mutagen into the atmosphere.
So he's basically like a mad scientist.
Yeah, he's a mad scientist.
Yeah. And the engineers in this film.
And it's interesting to note that...
They're not quite the same.
The engineers in this film are a little bit different.
As in Prometheus.
Yeah, from the ones we saw in Prometheus.
Yeah,
they're a bit more primitive.
Yeah, a little.
In their technology.
Less advanced.
And their attire.
Yeah.
So that raises some questions.
Okay.
About,
Yeah, that's a mystery.
What kind of engineers are these?
Yeah.
Where do they fit into the...
Where do they fit in?
Larger engineer civilization.
And it's weird how the black goo, like...
Yeah, they all
those canisters of it look like...
The canisters,
they do look like DNA.
Yeah.
Which is kind of a nice visual.
They got ready.
Yeah.
So it's clear that like one of
the big themes.
Big themes is like creation.
Of Covenant is creation.
Yeah.
And Ridley Scott has said that he wanted to explore the why.
The why of it all.
Behind the Xenomorphs.
Yeah. Why were they created?
And it's continuing those themes.
Yeah.
From Prometheus.
Yeah.
About creators and creation.
Yeah, and it's like what's getting motivation?
Motivating David to do all this.
Are really interesting.
Yeah.
Because he's clearly
why would he
destroy all these engineers?
Well, he's driven by a kind of a scientific curiosity.
Yeah. He's also kind of disgusted by humanity.
He hates us.
Yeah, he thinks humans are flawed.
Yeah.
And he also seems to have some contempt.
Yeah.
For the engineers.
The engineers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's interesting, like, how that connects to...
Right, and it's very similar...
Our Holloway in Prometheus.
To Holloway's line in Prometheus.
That's why we could.
Because we could.
Yeah.
That's
like this...
His whole thing.
Yeah.
To both of them.
Yeah, okay.
And
somebody even made the comparison.
And then there's also an interesting parallel to David and Wagner's character, Albrecht. From Das Rheingold.
In Das Rheingold.
Okay, yeah.
They both... kind of forsake love in pursuit of power.
They're both kind of like willing to...
Albrecht steals the Rheingold to create this ultimate power. And David is creating these xenomorphs, these ultimate weapons.
Okay. Say that.
Okay, well, let's...
So it's interesting how...
Let's move on from
all these themes kind of weave together the big picture stuff.
And talk about...
But let's talk about...
Some of the
more specific details.
Other details, yeah.
The homages.
Okay. So there are a
lot of Easter eggs.
Of Easter eggs in this film.
For fans to pick up on.
Yeah, for the eagle-eyed viewer.
Yeah.
So for example, we see the drink bird toy in the Covenant's bridge.
The drink bird, yeah.
Which is a direct callback
I saw that.
To the Nostromo in the original Alien.
Yeah.
There's also the terrace.
Yeah.
Where David overlooks the engineer city.
Okay.
That's visually inspired.
Yeah.
By Arnold Buckland's painting Isle of the Dead.
Interesting.
Which was also an influence on Geiger's work.
On Geiger.
Yeah.
There's also the Cryo Sleep prologue.
Oh, yeah.
That was released online.
I saw that as a webisode.
Yeah. It's all Last Supper or something, right?
Alien, Covenant prologue, Last Supper.
Yeah.
And that kind of gives us a little bit more backstory.
Yeah.
About the crew.
About what happened.
What they were doing before they went to sleep.
Yeah.
And when David first appears, he quotes the line, "Whistle and I will come."
Whistle and I will come.
From an M.R. James ghost story.
Oh, interesting.
Which kind of foreshadows.
The
danger.
Yeah. Okay.
And there's also an interesting kind of philosophical connection.
It's weird how, like...
Between David...
David is kind of like Ash from the original Alien.
Yeah.
They both express this kind of...
Jerks. For humanity.
For the same reasons.
Yeah, they both see humans as weak and flawed.
Yeah, they think the aliens are like
And they both kind of admire the xenomorphs.
Yeah. And there's even like a line.
And there's even a line.
That's almost exactly.
Where Tennessee says, a walk in the park.
Oh, yeah. Tennessee's walk in the park.
Which echoes Parker's line.
Yeah.
In the original Alien.
Yeah, it's like the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
And then the deaths.
What about the deaths?
Of Rix and Upworth are very reminiscent.
Of the deaths of Parker and Lambert?
Yeah.
In
the original Alien. Yeah, it's like they're...
And there's even a
kind of repeating
a potential allusion to sexual assault. In a longer version of the scene.
Yeah. And they even do that thing.
And there's also the scene
where they try
to seal Xenomorph in a certain part of the ship.
Yeah, like in a...
Which reminds us of what they do.
Specific compartment.
In Alien.
In Alien, oh, yeah.
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 So there's all these kind of really hitting you over the head with these like references.
Rare films.
Yeah.
And then they kill the alien by like...
And we also see the Xenomorph being incinerated.
Burning it.
By the lander engines.
Yeah.
At the end.
Which is like kind of the opposite.
Which is kind of the reverse.
Of how they do it.
Of how it's defeated.
In the
original Alien.
Yeah.
And there's a shot of David watching.
Oh, I remember that.
Xenomorph.
Yeah.
Through a window.
That was creepy.
Which is very similar to a shot in Alien Resurrection.
Yeah.
And for fans of Blade Runner.
Yeah.
There are a few nods to that film as well.
What are we talking?
So Daniels stabs David under the chin.
Okay.
With a horseshoe nail.
Okay.
And then he says, "That's the spirit."
Yeah.
Which is a reference to Roy Batty's last line in Blade Runner.
I see.
There's also a moment where David kisses Walter.
Oh, yeah.
Before stabbing him.
Before killing him.
Which echoes Roy Batty kissing Dr. Tyrell.
Okay.
And if you look closely,
you
can actually see the name Deckard.
Oh, wow.
On one of the cryosleep pods.
That's cool. Yeah. That's a deep cut.
Yeah.
Okay.
But there is one kind of continuity error.
Oh, really?
In the film.
Okay.
Walter mentions that the events of Prometheus took place 10 years earlier.
Okay.
When in fact it was 11 years.
It should have been 11 years.
Yeah.
So somebody messed up.
Yeah. It's a little slip up there.
Okay. What else? What other?
We also see the crash engineer docking claw ship.
Oh, yeah. The big horseshoe thing.
Which suggests that there was some kind of confrontation.
So David, like, blew it up or something.
Between it and David's juggernaut.
Yeah, okay. And then the swallowing trick.
And here's a bit of trivia.
That David does.
The swallowing trick David uses is kind of gross.
To smuggle the facehugger embryos was inspired by Ridley Scott's research.
Really?
For the film Cartel.
For Cartel.
Yeah, about drug mules.
Okay.
So.
That's creepy.
That's where he got that idea.
Okay. And then the novelization.
The novelization of the film actually goes into more detail about some of the things that we see on screen.
Yeah.
So, for example, it describes the egg sacs as being smaller and more mold-like.
Like fungus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it also emphasizes the increased strength
of the facehugger.
Of the facehugger.
Okay, so it's like a new...
Yeah, so it's like a slightly different breed of facehugger.